guys, it's your girl Virgo Queen here, and you are watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Todd has been involved in covering the sport of mixed martial arts since the 1990s, and Miguel has been the matchmaker for over 200 events worldwide. Please subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for future episodes. In the meantime, you can catch me here on TikTok at Virgo Queen, one and only. Thanks.
All right, this is Todd Atkins. I'm back with Miguel Iturrate, and we're going to cover a number of topics today on MMA Conspiracy Hour. And as always, we appreciate people checking this out. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us, share it with people, all that good stuff. We appreciate it. And Miguel, we kind of wanted to start out with this Conor McGregor, kind of racist tweets, and kind of where we think his head might be towards Khabib Nurmagomedov. It's like he can't let this thing go. And I kind of just wanted to let Miguel start with that.
Well, on the subject of Connor, I'm going to start from a little different angle where, like, I saw recently Chael and a bunch of other, well-known media people are once again 2 years behind me and you, saying, oh, they don't think Connor's ever going to fight again. I think like I said, I think we said that 2 years ago, when the Chandler fight start, with all the Chandler stuff and we predicted that the fight would not happen. And then, and you asked me, push comes to shove. And I said that I think we're done with Conor McGregor. And there's nothing that you've seen since then that would point you otherwise. So now all of a sudden the other MMA guys think they're geniuses and have figured it out, but the signs have been there for a long time. This guy's never going to fight again. Um, um, there are even videos of him earlier in his career when he didn't have any money, him saying, when he makes money, why would he go? Why would he keep fighting? He's going to just go off into the sunset and enjoy it. And that may have been a one-time interview. You can slip up and make a big deal out of it. Maybe it wasn't a big deal at the time, but he did say it. Um, he was at the bare knuckle fight recently. Where Eddie Alvarez took a loss to Jeremy Stevens, which in Philadelphia, which was sort of unfortunate for Eddie. We know he's at the tail end of his career. He still looks great, but he's another guy that counts on. When he was young, he counted on speed and precision, and those are the first things that go. And they go in a way that's not noticeable to the naked eye, to the fan's eye. So he still looks great and fast and has moments in his fights, but it's easier to catch him. Chin's not as sturdy as it once was, so he's easier to hurt a little bit. And I'd like to see him. Thought he might retire last fight. I thought he was beating. What's the other guy from bare knuckle fighting that was a UFC guy? That the
Stevens?
guy that lost. The guy that lost to Jake Paul.
Lost to Jake Paul.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, his name's escaping me, but I can see his face. But anyway, yeah, Eddie was doing real well in that, but he stopped. He quit on the bench because he'd been hurt a little bit.
Mike
And I
Perry.
wanted to see, yeah, Mike Perry. That's it. That's what it is. And I wanted to see him retire then. But I think he probably got talked into or wanted to do one last fight in Philly in his home crowd, get pumped up. I know, Eddie is his entire career has trained hard, so I know he was prepared going into this fight. But again, speed and precision at 40 is not what it was when you were 22. And Stevens is another one of those gritty, you know, take you downtown, take punishment to give punishment kind of fighters. Bare knuckle seems to suit him pretty well mentality wise as well. So they gave him a difficult fight. That's okay. Eddie can handle difficult fights, but it's a shame. I'd like to see Eddie retire. McGregor was there making a spectacle of himself, trying to take the spotlight from the fighters, which, at this point is wholly inappropriate. He's supposed to be promoting the fighters, not trying to take the spotlight for himself. In my opinion, he was drunk at the event again. Um, Certainly he showed a lot of the characteristics of somebody who was having a good time in, that respect. And, who knows what else he may have had going on. His stare down with Stevens is exactly what I'm talking about, where he's showing, you know, that he's going to do bare knuckle now. As far as I know, he's still under contract with the UFC. Maybe he thinks bare knuckle is going to be easier because you don't have to practice groundwork and things like that. That's been one of the things some of the guys that have crossed over to bare knuckle say, that the training's actually easier on their bodies because the groundwork and the grinding on the ground does take its toll on you, especially once you get older. Um, Again, it sounds like a drunk guy talking, because Connor's not fought in 4 years. We were looking at his record before coming online, and he's taken 2 year breaks before. He had taken a 2 year break before he came back to fight Nurmagomedov, which was the loss that set him off on path after his career where he was up and down and he was no
Yeah.
longer himself. So you can argue that Connor's had 7 good years. 7 good years from maybe 2011 after he lost to Duffy on a small show. He peeled off a nice winning streak to get into the UFC, and you could probably say the Duffy loss focused him. That may have been when he read his sister the book his sister gave him or whatever. Um, and he started envisioning himself and doing, so he had 7 good years of focus, but since then he's completely not looking like anybody who's ring ready at all. He can call out Nurmagomedov all he wants. Um, if that fight were to be signed, it would be a huge fight. People would definitely watch it. So let's do a hypothetical. Let's say, where are we? We're in February. Let's say 6 months in July. They do this fight for the July, when they used to do the big show in July with the fighter convention stuff. They really
International
don't.
Fight Week. Yeah.
Yeah, they no longer really do that whole hullabaloo. But let's say they wanted to bring all that back and do a major fight. Nurmagomedov and McGregor would probably be one of the fights that would definitely get the most eyes in the world, right? Who would you bet would come in to that fight in better shape? Khabib
Oh
or
yeah, no
McGregor?
doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Khabib. Khabib looks like he's retired. I'm sure he's still mental wise, he's still able to coach people at an extremely high level. He's got his father's mentorship to mimic,
Islam
and
said he trains every day.
yeah, and I think older, retired guys like that are still living clean and living the fight life because he's in the gym and McGregor's on his boat or, uh, molesting cocktail waitresses or doing whatever it is he does. Um, so yeah, I'll give you a good example. Yeah, a periphery example, right? But there's a kid named Barrick Jordan. You probably know him, Joe Jordan's son. And Barrick Jordan is one of the highest rated freshman wrestlers. I don't want to get it wrong. I think he went to Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. He's at either one of those two schools. And respect that I'm going off the top of my head here. But he was one of the number one recruits in the country. Joe Jordan, his father, had 90 MMA fights and was a workhorse and a very tough fighter who never broke through into the big money or anything like that. He focused on bringing his kid up right. And Joe Jordan fought at 135 pounds. Joe's probably 220 now in retirement. You know what I mean? He's a big, heavy guy. He's not in shape and stuff like that. But when he's got to lay a beat down on his kid on the mats, he'll do it because he's an old dog. And you can't take the fight out of an old dog. He instincts and things like that. He's slower. He's not what he used to be when he was at the top of his physical peak in his MMA game and stuff like that. But Joe Jordan is still not a man to be messed with. So Beeb is a guy who operated at the top of the game. You think you can mess with this guy because he's been retired for a few years? That's still one of the meanest men on the planet. And I'm not one of those guys that puts Khabib in the top five all time. But you know, other people do, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in the conversation. I just wouldn't put him there myself. But you think Khabib is somebody to be messed with? And so this is more of Connor delusion syndrome. You know what I mean? Connor really doesn't have anybody who smacks him in the head and says, when are you going to clean up your act? And again, here's the other part: is plus 36. If they fight in July, he'd be 37 for that fight. So he has sat around, and any years that he might have still had, left on his career or whatever, he's drank away. He's drank away. So yeah, he'd be turning 37 probably the week after a early July 4th type of fight. Um, and we've said it before too, littler men, and this guy, he's not a heavyweight. Um, they don't have the shelf life to last into their late 30s. So Connor was done years ago, and it's striking to me that the professional MMA media is just figuring this out. This was clear as day.
Yeah, I don't even know why, people are still bringing up the possibility of him fighting. It's ridiculous. It has been for a long time. I just think people are hard up to come up with original ideas or content ideas, and they just keep referring back to this.
Yeah, again, when you make your money off of hits on your Instagrams and your YouTube channels and your websites and things like that, when that's what you do, for the last 7 to 10 years, McGregor's name has been a name you just put in a title and you get your hits. So yeah, they haven't figured out yet that they need a new trick. I don't think McGregor is even as popular in Ireland. I imagine that at some point around the Mayweather fight, and beating Alvarez, and a two-time world champion and stuff like that, um that he did the crossover thing, at least in Ireland, and you can argue worldwide. He was more than just a UFC fighter. He became like a social media star and a celebrity kind of person. Um, but especially in Ireland, that rape conviction, even if it was only in a civil suit and stuff like that, that's going to take a lot of the wind out of your sails. There are a lot of women, maybe even middle-aged women or women his age, 35 to 40 years old, that say that are going to be completely turned off by him. And those women are probably married, and the husband's going to have to at least curb back on his counter enthusiasm around his wife and stuff like that. I mean, these are just facts that he is probably not as big a star even in Ireland as he was, 5 years ago or however many years ago, when he was still really actively fighting, at least trying. And even then, when we saw him last in the ring, his you know his comebacks weren't as sharp, they weren't as funny, they were recycled. His pose downs were the same that they were for many years. And it looked like he was just trying to, um to use a drug addict's term, chase the dragon. Find that buzz that you got that first time and you're not finding it.
Yeah, I want to ask you, why do you think he unleashed this racist tweet, nutty tweet that he did? Why is he still kind of all fixated on Khabib? He's lost other fights, but in my opinion, I think it's just that he took everything that Conor kind of believed in, his ego. Conor felt like he was the best at the time. That's what I think. And
Yeah,
then he retired and never gave him a chance to get it back.
yeah. I think um he spent, after he broke his foot, he spent a little bit of bluster, yelling and chasing down Poirier, but Poirier kind of kept his head down, kept his focus, and kept right on fighting. You know what I mean? And McGregor went off the rails and didn't fight. And he had his rehab and everything to do and stuff like that. But Khabib retired is less to focus. He's kind of an easier target. You know, and to me, the tweet, this racist tweet, you can't. I think the sign off where he calls him Fasto says it all. I think that was alcohol talking. He doesn't. If he can't spell, maybe I guess you can excuse it every once in a while. But again, I think this was Connor's problems, and he gets on a roll, thinking, and all of a sudden, he's almost back in the ring in his head. And I think that's what happens with when he goes on a binge. He was recently at the bare knuckle show doing stare downs with Jeremy Stevens and stuff like that. I think it's carried over here. He was in public again. He was partying again and showing the same old habits again. And all of a sudden, he's doing something stupid again. Dana's now on this kick where anybody can say anything, and freedom of speech and stuff like that. And I understand that. And he's Irish. Him using the N word may not be as grave, especially about Khabib, who's not you know black. Um, it doesn't hold the gravity of you know somebody white in America using that word, or anything like that. Um, one thing that other people may not know is that Khabib and the southern Russian people of Dagestan and um, Chechnya and those areas, the Muslims, are called the N word by white Russians from the north, the Slavs, the blue-eyed blonde Russians. They use that word too as a kind of as a parody of Americans using it on people they think were slaves or were lesser than them at one point. But they very clearly use that word about them, and I kind of didn't even know that probably. You know, he accuses Khabib of being ignorant and of being, having sex with his cousin and all kinds. So what does that tell me? That tells me um that Connor watched Borat, and
Yeah, it's almost
that's about as educated as Connor is.
it's kind of almost embarrassing to talk about Connor at this
Yeah,
point.
it is at this point. It is at this point. He deserves to be canceled. And I never thought I'd say that about anybody, but at this point, I've been saying this for a couple of years now. He has to show me. I'm tired of him. I'm tired of him telling me. He has to show me if he's going to fight again, and it's not going to happen now. We like I said, we've known that for a couple of years. But I said this a couple of years ago. You can go back into our videos and see it. I need to see it. I don't need to hear it. I'm tired of hearing it. I'm tired of hearing him and his bluster and this and that and the other thing. If he's going to fight, let's see it. And if he's going to be back on top, and even when the Chandler fight got canceled, he's on record as saying that when he comes back, he will give everybody the greatest MMA performances of all time and that sort of stuff. Um, even Dana was like, "Well, he'll fight by November." Well, November's 4 months ago. Where was he?
Yeah, and now he's saying he doesn't know what Connor's going to do.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, you know, in the world of prostitution that the UFC is involved in, um, if Connor comes back, they will put him in the ring again. And regardless of what he looks like, how he looks, what weight, Connor will probably, if Connor were to ever fight again, I think there's near zero chance of that, and I've been saying that for years, well ahead of the rest of the press, you too. Um, it'll be at 185. And that's your first sign. Because as big as he was at 145, he's not a 185 pounder. Maybe 170. Mm, maybe 170. Again, he's a 145 and 155 pound champion. Maybe against Leon Edwards at 170, cleaned up. In his early 30s, you could have made a legitimate world class fight there. But the next time Connor comes into the ring at this point, after the last 4 years of appearing coked up on interviews and being drunk at shows and being arrested and convicted and losing lawsuits and things like that. The next time you see him, it will not be seeing a world class fighter. It will be seeing a circus. If again, hypothetically, if we were to see him again, which yeah, close your eyes and pretend that's a lot closer than we are to ever seeing him in the octagon again. I'm sure if he was in Vegas and he ran into Mayweather and he had his morning shots of whiskey and a couple of toots of cocaine and he hit the strip and he saw Mayweather, he'd be challenging Mayweather to a rematch and calling him a little so and so and this and that and the other thing because he's still living in the past. And that's what the Nurmagomedov tweet and that is McGregor's living in the past. He still remembers the audience and the crowd and the reactions and stuff. And you know, I can understand it. I can't empathize with it, obviously, because it's not the kind of experience that's mutual to both of us. But that he had special moments, that he had moments that no one else on earth can has equaled, or maybe a handful of guys on earth has equaled. Some of the high moments of McGregor's career have to rate up there with like Otani moments, like Cristiano Ronaldo moments, like big all-time great sport moments. McGregor did achieve that. That's something nobody else did, especially when you consider paydays and the attention he was getting. And when he'd fight in Vegas, half the arena would be Irish people and that sort of stuff. So in his head, I'm not surprised he hasn't left that he hasn't forgotten that left such an impression on him, even like you said, like a PTSD type of impression on it, where he's continuing to live a moment that happened 8 years ago. And you
Yeah,
know,
that's hard for a lot of people,
yeah,
entertainers, people on
especially a guy,
stage, military people. It is hard
yeah,
to let
especially a
go of.
guy. And I don't mean to put down military PTSD and combat PTSD, which is a tragedy and something that really doesn't get the attention it gets. But I think that when you're standing in the top of the world and you've been working, and he had laser focus for after the Duffy fight, he did manage to pull off 5 to 7 years of getting to what he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do, and he deserves credit for that. But he has to realize that he's let time go by, and it's now 7 or 8 years since the last time he performed at that level of peak performance. Like you look up and it's going to be a decade in a couple of years, and he's still not going to have fought. And then after that, he's going to be, 45, and he's going to realize, it's been 20 years since my high moments. I haven't, and that's what he's involved in. So I think that you're seeing all of the warts of the trappings of his success starting to show their ugly side on him. And he's very public, very much a person who controls himself, has nobody who helps control him or helps uh cool his jets, if it's the right, way to say it. So he operates on instinct. And again, you put breakfast on a mirror and a couple of shots of whiskey out there, like I suspect that he does, and yeah, then you become less inhibited and more likely to relive those moments from the past. But he's living in the past.
Yeah, no doubt. I wanted to kind of um, switch into this TKO versus the Ali Act kind of thing. This is something that's kind of popped up in the last couple of days. Ari Emanuel had made a comment, I believe on Pat McAfee's show, where he had said, that they were interested in dipping their toe into boxing. He had also said the Ali Act ruined boxing, and he made kind of a sideways comment. He didn't get deep into it, but he said, "We'll see what happens with the Ali Act." And a lot of people took that as he's going to try to get rid of it or eliminate it. What do you think about this?
I think this guy should keep his mouth shut and stay in the boardroom and make his billions of dollars. There's nothing about this guy that's an expert on anything in these combat sports nothing about it. He was nowhere to be found 10 years ago. Probably had no interest until he realized as a business that he can do what he normally does. And he's a billionaire, so he's not a dumb guy, but he has no passion for the sports, and he's not an expert. And I've seen him; he shows all the signs. And when you see him in pictures, and you don't see him in public in pictures very often, but I certainly have seen pictures of him with that UFC belt slung around his shoulder, like he's the champ. You know what I mean? So I give no credit to what he says. And my opinion is that the Ali Act um, it did not ruin boxing. What it did was, what would be proper to say, I think, is it didn't really fix boxing, which it kind of was supposed to do. But if you look at the history of the Ali Act, its impact, people talk about it more, but its impact on the sport has been circumvented by the boxing mafia. And by that I mean, the essential parts. And the Ali Act has a few, if you know the Ali Act, which I doubt most people that like to throw the words around know the Ali Act very well. But if you know it, there are a lot of things that it's supposed to do in terms of fighter safety, fighter transparency, and organizing things like organizing the weigh-ins and organizing um, that the commissions are supposed to be there at the weigh-ins and the processes that go into that, organizing the medical exams and things like that. So let's examine the medical exams. The medical exams, I'm going to pull it up here for a second, um, including mandatory medical exams. So let me see here. Where is the medical exam piece that I read? And I've read this before, I'll say that, but reading it now. So boxer safety requires to be provided with a safety health environment, including access to medical care and equipment. Okay, so that's making sure there's ambulances there and things like that. But because Muhammad Ali suffered brain damage, there is the mandatory medical exams. The law requires that boxers undergo a comprehensive medical examination before each bout, including tests for brain damage, vision, and health issues. Now, tests would imply that you're looking at them, and if they have brain damage, you're going to keep them from fighting, right? So now, only in extreme cases do I think that's the case. What this has become is become commission paperwork where they're more concerned whether your exam is on their letterhead in the form that they provide on their website that you can download than actually having a doctor review CAT scans and MRIs. If a fighter's undergone three CAT scans during his licensing process, is there any process where a doctor on the boxing commission is reviewing old CAT and MRI scans and the latest one and see if there are any new dark spots or any new, I'm not a doctor, but any new dark spots or any changes that are concerning? I can assure you that that's not happening. So at this point, that part, for example, is a farce. It's just, yeah, they all undergo medical exams. So unless, if you're blind in one eye, yeah, you probably won't pass the medical exam. And they can say, well, and in the case of MMA, that doesn't have the Ali Act, but you've got the example of a fighter like Ryan Bowe, an excellent top shelf UFC ready fighter, but he has a mass on his brain. And he fought with it throughout his career, and it was benign, but it was enough for them to say, no, we won't take the risk of having you fight with that. Um, this allows them to say the medical exams are stopping a certain percentage of fighters. You turn this into numbers on a spreadsheet, and it's like, yeah, we've only approved 94% of our licenses. The medical exams caught 6% of the people that are not good for this. But again, some of those not good, not approved guys may have used the wrong letterhead on their forms and stuff like that. So it allows the commissions to play their numbers game and bureaucratic game, but doesn't really protect the fighters, even though they're all going through the subject of medical exam. So, you can argue that the Ali Act there um, hasn't ruined boxing, but it definitely failed the fighters. And another section where it's failed the fighters, and this is the one um, on the rankings and the fighter rankings. They're supposed to be transparent rankings so that the fighters are aware of what they need to do to move up in the rankings. Obviously fight guys ahead of you or whatever it is. And the organizations that provide the belts, which should not be the promoters, the organizations that fight that provide the belts should let you know. Now we know in boxing that there's not one organization, there's four or five that are considered the legitimate belts. And if you don't pay your sanctioning fee for them, they won't rank you. So that part of the system has failed and is broken in the Ali Act. There's supposed to be transparency for title shots. Title shots are not supposed to be um, uh, decided by a promoter, right? But they are because the promoters are looking to make the fights that are going to make them the most money. So, they have to. Do you think Canelo has fought at least some fights where the guy that he fought, like when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, that was a fight sort of everybody wanted to see because Billy Joe was undefeated or close to undefeated. I'd have to look back, but Billy Joe came with a lot of steam. He was a good fighter. You have Britain versus Mexico, which is two boxing powerhouses and stuff. But he's had some down fights in between and on there. And that's not really the way the Ali Act is crafted. It should be competition first, and you should be. There are guys lining up number one, even in the alphabet soup. There are number one ranked guys in every division, and it's sometimes situation where there's different number one guys ranked for WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO. Those are the guys that should be number one for the title shots, right? But so the Ali Act really hasn't fixed boxing. So again, Ari should have probably kept his mouth shut. And if they're going to be in boxing, again, just stop talking about it. This is the same kind of the same. I'll chant the same stuff I'm chanting at Connor to Dana and to KO. Stop talking about jumping into boxing. You've been doing it for 10 years and you haven't done shit. And you could. And right now, like for example, with Saudi Arabia and with some of the money and the power players there, if they came in and declared a new belt and the money behind it and put their media machine behind it, you would see boxers start to sign up for fighting under their flag, and the WBO, WBA, IBF, and WBC belts would start to be second tier belts to their belt in a hurry. If they had done it 5 years ago, we might already have been in the situation where they'd be the premier belt now. But instead, they've chosen to just talk about it, talk about signing Anthony Joshua, et cetera, et cetera. And there are power players in boxing. There are a few people that probably want to keep the status quo because they're making good money. Eddie Hearn is you know, Eddie Hearn's not Bob Arum, and that Bob Arum is approaching, 90. And he's got a short, but Bob Arum is got a grip on what he wants to do, and he doesn't want to change. And Eddie Hearn is maybe not. He's not half his age. He's probably a little older, but um, Eddie Hearn's got a lot of longevity. He's a second generation boxing promoter as well, and the Hearn library is a strong library as well. Um, he's got a huge entity and a huge machine going, and he makes his money under the current way. So they've got a couple of enemies and stuff like that, but they could overshadow them very quickly if they put the full force of it and had actually acted instead of talked. And if they, so they can go and try to repeal the Ali Act. That to me would be more of a symbolic message. It would be a signal to the rest of boxing of the type of power they have. But at the end of the day, the Ali Act is really only effective in the States, and boxing is sort of been marginalized in the States. It's not as big. Maybe they think they could
It's a
make it
mess in
bigger.
the States, is what it
Yeah,
is.
maybe they could make it bigger and clean it up a little bit. And by clean it up, I mean, make big fights and put them in the States again. At this point, you've got Gervonta Davis, probably, um, a handful of other guys that operate in the States only that are going to um, catch people's attention and stuff like that. But if you look at Usyk, maybe Fury still has some cash. The British heavyweight division still has a lot of matchups and rivalries that you could see. They're always going to be British fighters coming up in a lot of weight classes. You've got Inoue in Japan. You've got guys all over the world that don't even need the United States market. So, the Ali Act doesn't have any effect on them. So again, this is one of those things where if he kept his mouth shut, then maybe they could have operated a little bit more. He got attention to them before they've done anything. So now do it, do something in boxing if you're going to do it. Do it. I want to see it because they haven't. They've been talking about it for 10 years, so it's like they're tired of hearing about it.
I wouldn't mind seeing the Riyadh Season Championship belt. Like if you can get all the
Yeah,
best guys under the Riyadh Season roof, I'll live with it as a
yeah,
fan.
yeah, yeah. And if you look at it, Saudi Arabia went for it, went to do that in golf, and they almost pulled it off. And I'm not a golf fan. I couldn't even name three golfers. But when they announced that they were going to do an alternate group to the PGA was quaking in their boots. And they saw a lot of their top shelf guys go over there and sign for them. What happened there, if I recall correctly, was that Saudi Arabia butchered a political rival in an embassy in Turkey, and they took a real big hit on the international uh, you know, uh, prestige for a little bit, and golfers were made to look bad, and it maybe looked like maybe they weren't going to be as big or whatever. They survived that. They managed to get through that. Nobody remembers or cares about that anymore. But that is probably what stopped them from taking over golf. So, and with the UFC and you know the PGA again, it seems to me to be like established and like again, I know nothing about golf. I don't care. I don't follow it. It's not sport that I really have any interest in at all. But the PGA is kind of like, they operate with their rules and they've got an established deal. They very little competition. So when competition popped up, they got scared, right? But they weren't going to change or anything like that. But they're also not a hyper, like active, energetic Dana White, Ari Emanuel TKO pressing charging to make their sport bigger and better. Obviously they're making golfers make a fortune, so they're doing some things right and stuff like that. But I don't know if I get the essence of what I'm trying to say. But if you've got Dana and you've got Ari on your side, based on their track record and what they've done in a very short period of time to make their sport worldwide and bigger, you've got an energetic group there that's going to do it faster and stronger than the PGA group would do, even if you signed on and had them help you. And you didn't, you had a rivalry there with them. Here, if Dana were to go over and manage a boxing entity with Saudi Arabian money and stuff like that, I tell you, it'd probably be about 5 years before the WBA, WBO, IBF, and WBC belts are marginalized. And going after the Ali Act is just a symbol. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but let's talk about some of these journalists, like Luke Thomas, Errol some of these others that are acting like the sky is falling because their reaction is, oh, this is the worst thing to ever happen in the history of the world.
I seriously wonder if either of them has ever sat down and read the Ali Act from beginning to end. And it's as simple as that. So they are caring about hits. Oh my OMG, Ali Act to be repealed because of the UFC, and that's what they want to put in the title of their next video and get 300,000 hits and cash your check. So yeah, they're successful at what they do. They can keep doing it, but again, it's not reality. Reality is that the Ali Act didn't fix boxing. That's the worst thing that you can say about it. It didn't have the impact that everybody wanted to because the mafia circled their wagons and figured out, the WBC, WBO, they can all have champions and different champions. And, for champion to fight champion, they can avoid it for as long as they want. And none of that should be happening under what the Ali Act entitles, because the Ali Act means there's one title. And, by having five in boxing active, they all think that they're the best title, the only title, the most important title. And they all act that way. But it's not the case because, unless you're like a Usyk type who's united all the belts, um, there's always open to like interpretation matches that don't happen. Especially at lower weight classes. In the heavyweights, we got to the point where God bless Eddie Hearn and Joshua, Fury to a certain extent, Usyk, Wilder. These guys actually stepped up and went into a mode where they got the belts united. Um, you have that in maybe a couple other weight classes. Canelo really hasn't done it, if I'm not mistaken. I think Canelo's been, hopping one weight class to another. There's some belts that he has actually gotten rid of and left belts behind because he didn't want to pay the sanctioning fees that these people do and stuff like that. So there's nothing about the Ali Act that is actually being um, implemented across the board in boxing the way it should be. So when we're talking about the biggest boxers in the world, you start talking about weight classes that have less attention, that you don't know the top guys really in, super bantamweight, super, flyweight. I looked, I think four of the six number one ranked guys in the lowest weight classes, this lowest six weight classes, of the top six of four of the top guys in the six weight classes at the bottom are Japanese. Does anybody know who they are besides Inoue? So the Ali Act is a marginal document. It didn't fix boxing the way it was. If it goes away, boxing isn't going to die. It's not going to have. It's going to have practically zero impact. And it's kind of sad to say, well, a couple of things that we do get from the Ali Act that and UFC is mimicking is that they're supposed to disclose what they make, what the fighters make. And the UFC does when they're in the United States in the boxing commission, you usually get the minimal contract fighter pay for every fighter. And websites and these guys do, they do a video about, oh, this was the pay and this was the pay for the fighters and things like that. So they all get to get their hits and their links. But again, you get out of the United States. Is that disclosed? No. So again, the Ali Act sadly didn't fix boxing. So taking it away will not break boxing.
So you don't think it'll hurt the fighters' paydays and stuff like that?
If the consequence of removing the Ali Act is that the UFC becomes involved, in their paydays will go up.
You mean the UFC fighters' paydays?
No, I mean boxing paydays. If Dana goes into boxing and he's backed by Saudi Arabian money or even just TKO money, then I think you'll see a situation where on their cards, fighters will not be fighting at the bottom, right? Because at the top, boxers already make big money, right? But I'm talking about there are still guys on shows that are fighting for $50 a round, and that should probably change. And that Dana will change because it's an easy gift. They've got the money, so you make it, three, like in the UFC now, nobody really comes into the UFC making 2,000 anymore. It's up to about 10 and 10, right? So 10 and 10 is the entry level money. What if 10 and 10 were entry level for boxing? That would change the game, the game completely. Even 5
Do
and
you think for
5
the
would
top
change the
fighters,
game.
so these guys that are getting like huge amounts, do you
Yeah,
think
then
their
they'll
pay
keep
would
getting.
come down?
I think that would be a hard sell. I don't think so. I think that they would have to leave them. Maybe they do try to take some of that money for themselves, but the money's being generated somewhere, right? So if the money's there and the fighters have been getting it, It's going to be again. It's we've always said, and this is something that makes sense. If you work at Citibank or Walmart, making $35,000 a year or $75,000 a year, and you've been getting 2% raises every year and building up to get, now I'm making 78.4 after making 77 last year, and they go up. It's very difficult for them to come back to you, and nobody would accept for them to come back to you and go, you know what, next year you're going to make 60. It doesn't happen. And people are not motivated or able to handle pay cuts. You're supposed to be getting raises at some point, right? So I think to take guys that made even 40 million for a fight and tell them they're going to make 20, you're going to have some kickback. So if I were managing the situation, I would leave the fighter pay at the top exactly the way it is, and I would manage bringing the fighter pay up to really change the game. The fighter pay up for the smoker guys making $50 and $100 a round. That would change the game, and it would make them instantly the big player in the sport. So that would be something they can change. They could change if they change that worldwide. The Ali Act has no impact one way or another, whether it's there or not.
Now let's last topic I kind of want to cover was Sean Strickland. Now we've both kind of been around the sport from the beginning, but it's not really something we've touched on. There are times where this happens, where guys will say, "I'm going to do this, that, and the other," and they've been begging for this fight for a year, like he has, ever since he lost to Duplessis the first time he thought he won. And then they go out there and they really don't do anything. Um, Maybe give your opinions on why that happens.
In this case, you know, I think Strickland has probably been stagnant for a little bit. In other words, he got himself to championship level, and he's an elite guy, and he does what he does. But there is the idea that you need to continue evolving and continue improving. And I think that he has leveled off. And when you start to come back fight after fight with the same game, it does catch up to you. And I think Duplessis is still an X factor where he's getting better. He clearly, the first fight, some people argue Strickland won. I don't think anybody's going to argue that Duplessis won this one pretty clearly, right? So he's clearly improved more than Strickland has. The other thing that is notable to me about Strickland is his activity at some point, may become a a negative for him. If you look back at when he was a 3-round fighter, um, he even fought a 5-round fight, full 5 rounds back in 2013 when he was in King of the Cage, right? But when he was a 3-round fighter, 1, 2, 3, this fight ended in the 4-minute mark of the third round at 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 8. So he had 8 full 3-round fights. Now count his 5-round fights, and the Uriah Hall fight in 2021 was his first 5-round fight. I'm just going to count the fights that went the distance. 1, 2, fast knockout, lost to Pereira. 3, 4, he beat Magomedov in the second round. 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's got 8 full 3-round fights and 8 full 5-round fights. It's a lot of mileage. It's a lot of mileage, and that's, I think, what also catches up to you, and you see sometimes is that the brain is working, but the muscle memory, the brain knows what to do, but the muscle memory is no longer twitchy and fast and able to connect with the brain the way you want it. Your steps slow, and you're not able to get off. And the fact is all those other going the distance in at least those 16 fights, and I didn't count back to the beginning of his career. There may have been more earlier. 16 fights that went the distance. Not only is it a lot of mileage, but yeah, yeah, it's the kind of thing where it shows that he doesn't have stopping power or submission. He's got good ground, obviously, and a great boxer, especially for MMA and stuff. And he heard Adesanya, which gets you drunk, right? Gets you drunk with power and the idea. But he never heard Duplessis. Even in the first fight when Duplessis was face was mashed up, that was from attrition and getting hit a lot. But Duplessis doesn't get hurt by him. And if you can't hurt a guy, then you're going to wind up having to fight perfect 5 round fights to win, and that gets harder and harder to do with all that mileage. So yeah, I think Strickland is now a guy. He's a couple years younger, but and maybe he still has a little more in the tank than you could argue him and Adesanya are around the same level. That now they become doormen in this division, especially until Duplessis loses the belt. There's no reason to do Duplessis Strickland 3, right? I don't even think Strickland's dumb enough to ask for that. I mean, sure he'll take it. You know, he doesn't turn down fights, but I'm sure he's going to be less vocal this time. You know, and you can argue at this point that Adesanya and Strickland are out of the title picture and on the B side of their career, going down the mountain instead of up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because clearly, I don't know. It's like his trainers let him into the fight, so they must have thought he could compete, and here they are begging him to engage. You know.
Yeah, yeah, it happens sometimes too with the right opponent. There's also the theory that Duplessis is his kryptonite kind of thing. I think we saw it last UFC with a guy who's got a much fresher body than Strickland. And that's the kid that fought Michael Page. He never got off the way we've seen him get off. Never could. And you could see going into the last round, his coach was begging him, "You got to do something." With the translators and stuff, it maybe wasn't as clear, but that's what they were telling him. What are you doing? This is your shot. You're not doing anything. You got to do something. You just can't find a way in. Duplessis came at Strickland in a way that, if you look at the fight, he broke his nose, but I think that some of the body shots that he was throwing may have also been there to slow Strickland down a little bit. Body shots are, and you've heard other experts say this, um, body shots are deceiving to a fan in an audience because you don't realize how damaging they can actually be in slowing people down. Unless you get that Gervonta Davis body shot where the guy's got to take a knee because he can't handle it. But, you know, if you take a body shot after body shot, several body shots, all you need is to land 3 to 5 body shots that are good. Even if you don't pull the guy and he takes a knee, that has an effect for the rest of the fight. The guy is really not going to want to take more of those or be able to handle more of those. So that will affect him. He will not be coming in the same way. Strickland wasn't as aggressive as he always is. Maybe it was because of the body shots. Maybe Duplessis is the one who deserves the credit for that.
Now, did you watch Suarez versus Zhang Weili? I mean, that was the
Yeah,
co-main event. Yeah, and here we had someone. Suarez was a favorite in some people's books. The
yeah.
first round kind of, if she was gonna win, the first round is how I thought she could win. Like she took her down pretty easily, was on top the entire time.
And
But
she
then
was
from there,
gassed by round
for
two.
there it was all downhill.
Yeah, she was. The thing about it is um the real great fighters I think have to come into a fight with multiple game plans and are able to make a switch and say this isn't working and have another strategy to go at it. And that's what Suarez didn't have. And also, if you get too full of yourself and you think, I'm gonna get her in the first round, and then the emotional dump of not getting her out in the first round and having to go back to your corner and be like, okay, that didn't work. Um, you've got to be prepared with. You can't make it. Some guys, I guess, can make it up on the spot, and those are the real geniuses of the sport, right? Some guys can pull a win out of a hat, or gals can pull a win out of a hat, and those are the true top people there. But Suarez didn't have another option. And she put all of her effort into round one, round two, and by the time she realized that her strategy wasn't going to work, she A didn't have any, or B, if you want to say plan B, she didn't have a plan B to turn to, and that obviously she's a conditioned athlete, right? So why was she so tired? Because of the emotion and the brain working overtime of trying to analyze why what she knew was going to work isn't working. So yeah, and you know, the other girl's an all-time great, and they underestimated her. They thought that they were going to be the next all-time great or that they were better and things like that. I think, um, a little bit less of the Kool-Aid when you haven't really done anything yet in the sport would have suited Suarez a little better. And that goes for the odds makers and the people betting on her that made her a favorite in this fight. They're not looking at what they were looking at with the other girl. And the other girl fights with the pressure of being the greatest Chinese fighter of all time.
Widely, yeah. Yeah.
Men and women. So she's got a position that she is going to, she is not going to. That's going to be hard to take away from her. Eventually, somebody will. Time will catch her. She will slow down. There will be a better fighter, like when um Amanda showed up and and beat Ronda and beat some of the other people, and Amanda showed there's a 2.0 in town. Um, Wiley will see her day come, but mentality wise and everything that she has to go through in her country and politics and um, the pressure on athletes to represent the country and stuff like that, she may be one of the toughest outs for anybody. That's a tall order for anybody to take out while she's still in her prime.
Do you think this is a fight that could raise Suarez's level, though, or what do you think?
Uh, I think she was a very high level fighter already. You know what I mean? So I think she does have to go back and analyze a little bit of the Kool Aid effect. Go in there and realize a plan B, maybe improve her striking a little bit so that you can rely on it. Maybe settling in to a boxing match would have suited her instead of some of those tired takedowns that you saw or takedown attempts rather. At the end of the day, in the fight, Wiley put her on her back. So really, that's another blow to her psychologically in the fight, and one from which I think after fourth round, I don't think anybody was saying that Suarez is going to have a good round five and come back and win this fight. I think it was clear that was the nail in the coffin, right? And I think it was the nail in the coffin in her head too. You're now. Not only did I not take her out, not only have I gotten tired, and now I'm fighting, an uphill battle to get her down, and it's getting harder and harder. Now I'm in a position I never dreamed I'd be in this fight. Well, guess what? You got to dream that you were there. You got to be prepared to be there. That's how fighters do it. I remember another, unsung hero of the women's divisions from the old days. It was a British fighter named Rosie Sexton, and Rosie's like a PhD and like a very very smart fighter. And on the day before the fight, she would go to her hotel room, light candles, set a timer, and do a a visualization of 5 minutes of each round. And she would do one round where she got to do everything she wanted to do and got off in the fight, and did a second 5 minutes of thinking about working your way out of bad positions and where the round is just not going your way and you're being dominated. That's preparation. Suarez didn't spend 5 seconds thinking about being on her back in this fight, not before, not in the preparation. So it showed.
Yeah, it's always a fascinating topic discussions with you. I think we covered a lot of ground today, a lot of interesting topics. Um, Yeah, as always,
I
great
think
discussion with you.
did we go long? I think we went long.
Yeah, well, we covered a few topics instead of one show with just one topic, which we may do more of. It's kind of sometimes good to put a few together. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
you can chop it up if you can. That might work for you too. But yeah, I'm glad to talk about it. I thought they were all worthy subjects. Um, we're starting to, it's now been years that we talk about Conor, everything about Conor except fighting, and I think other people in the media bringing that up is kind of like you know laughable. It shows how weak the MMA media is. Um, I think the Ali Act thing and the UFC thing um, is, I think I said, really the most realistic take on that. The UFC's been talking about being in boxing for a long time. If they're going to do it, they should do it. And the Ali Act, it doesn't have an impact. And, we've had, with Adesanya last podcast, now we've got, Strickland maybe in the same boat. And we've seen Wiley show, a champion at the top of her game, and beat back a challenge that was a worthy challenge on paper coming into the fight. But I think that we saw some holes in somebody that, maybe needed a couple more harder fights before earning a title shot. And it's one of the flat things about the UFC. The strawweight division in the women's division probably doesn't go 25 deep in the roster the way it maybe should. So that may have shown there as well. You know, just watching the sport and having fun. That's what we do.
yeah, and yeah, as always, as I said at the beginning, like, subscribe, share these episodes with people, and channel's still growing, and we appreciate all your support. And until the next episode, take care.
Hey, I'm Jacob Cooperman, and you were watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Todd has been involved in covering combat sports since the 1990s, and Miguel has match-made over 200 different events amongst various promotions worldwide. Please subscribe and be on the lookout for future episodes. As for me, you can check me out at Gloves Up on YouTube and Coop TV with 3 O's on Instagram. Thank you guys, and enjoy the episode.